Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and very warm welcome to this Governance Resource meeting for Thursday, the 20th of January 2022. Fire evacuation drills have not a notification of that. So if you hear alarm, please make your way up to the top car park. The next thing I would like to do is invite you all to stand with me in a minute's silence, memory of Lewis Rose. So you just keep your prayers and thoughts in mind regarding this very sad demise of the Walker family at Claycross, where is it? This happened this week, I can't believe. When I was chair here in 2016, I met on many occasions, fantastic people, lovely people, so you don't expect that to happen to them that age, so I believe they've got somebody to hope through the K-way. Thank you. Moving on, apologies and substitute.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Mrs Morley and Councillor Cruz.
Thank you. And item number 2, approval of the previous minutes. Would you like to move those? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Unanimous. Item number 3, moving on to public participation. Have anybody an objection?
None, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item number 4, interest. Any interest? No? Okay. Questions? No questions?
None, Chair.
Thank you very much. And moving into the main body of the agenda. Oh, well, before we start this, I'd just like to say that we've a lot to get through tonight. A lot of this has got to be on the agenda for the March budget meeting, and I would like to clear this up tonight, really. So please, if with your consent, I would like to move on as quick as we can and sort of keep questions and the debate as brief as we can. So we would like to get through it tonight, and we've only got a certain time to do it, so it's important for me to get through it. So thank you for your help on that. So first item then is item number 8, housing support system. Rob.
Thank you, Chair. This report concerns an existing housing and floating support service that the Council delivers through a Durham Housing Association. The proposal is to bring this service in-house, which will generate a saving to the Council in the cost of the service, and also further enhance the link between the service and the homelessness team within the Council. Colleagues from Legal and HR have been working with us closely to deliver this change, and both members of staff that deliver the service currently are keen to join the housing department. So I'm happy to leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Any questions, members? Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you'll be glad to know that on tonight's agenda, I don't think there's a lot we can disagree with. So your pleas about keeping it brief
Please hear that.
Will be thought, but not welcome to be told before every meeting that we have to be brief and concise, because debate is very important. But the minor point on this one that I just want to ask is it costs this council at the moment 80,000. How much of that will be saved? And also, is there any more detail on the grants that we can apply for, and what is the aim of those grants to help in the future?
At the moment, we've just been through the salary review, as it were, for job evaluation panel. So I've not got the figure in my head for the exact amount, but it does free up finance within the homelessness team to do other things with. So it is in that sense, it's a kind of win-win. In terms of the future grants that are available, we know from time to time that various funding regimes come out from the government that we can apply for, and also we track various grant opportunities that are provided by charities and other grant-giving bodies. So we would, when the service comes in-house, we can be a bit more proactive in looking for those particular sources of funding to deliver more for local people.
I'm just still not quite sure what those grants are for and what it will be enable this council to do in the future.
Apologies, through you, Chair. So the in the homelessness world, there are a great many variables that we can work on. So there might be a particular funding project around prison release or drug and alcohol services or mental health, that kind of thing. So grant-giving bodies will create a programme of funding, some of which might be short-lived, and organisations that have support services in place are in a good position to then go and bid for those funds. So often on a short-term basis, we may get funding, say, for 2 years to deliver a particular project. At the moment, we would always point to somebody else to do that on our behalf, and that depends on their ability and capacity at that time to go and bid for that funding. So typically, we would talk to the CAB or Age UK or other support services. With this service returning to the council, we could, within the housing team, we could create that capacity and make those bids and then deliver those services locally. Does that help? Yeah.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll follow in the footsteps of my colleague Steve here and move this quickly on. I will ask a short question, if I may, but then I will move that we accept this. This is an excellent initiative, I have to say. At first, I was a bit apprehensive. I thought, is this another housing association that we're putting money over to? But, we're already spending this amount, and to bring it in-house and to link it to two of the very important sections of our council, housing and welfare benefits, I think is a very creditable thing. My short question, Rob, is what are the other links here? For instance, presumably use will be made across the board from our hardship fund, which has been extremely successful in the past, and no doubt you, as I say, and Simon Benyon will be working very closely with the two other officers to bring about the benefits that are absolutely essential. I mean, I don't want to dwell on it, but paragraph 1.4 absolutely encapsulates the whole raison d'etre of this and its necessity at this point in time, and no doubt later on through the years as well.
So I think your question was about the links we can establish with other corporate priorities or other funding streams. So a good example would be the Derbyshire Discretionary Fund, which is delivered by the County Council, and that does things like provide for fridges, freezers, beds, that kind of stuff, essentials that people can't afford, rent and advance payments, those kind of things. This service is really well connected. The two staff are very experienced support workers, and they're very well connected with all the different funding regimes. From there are small charities that give grants that can solve particular problems at that moment in time, and it's all about trying to prevent people becoming a homelessness customer, essentially to help them sustain their existing tenancy, or if that tenancy is failing, to help them find another tenancy that they can sustain and provide early support, so that when somebody moves into a tenancy for the first time, they may not be used to reading the electric meter or setting up a gas account or telling council tax they've just moved in. All those kinds of things, if they're not sorted out quickly, can lead to an early loss of tenancy through arrears or eviction, or a credit rating score that affects their future opportunities. So to you and I, all those things are quite standard. We're used to doing those things day to day, but for people with less used to it, for example, they would struggle, and it would then impact on their ability in the future to sustain a tenancy. So it's very much about trying to prevent people becoming our future homelessness customers, and linking with, because there are a great many different forms of funding available, and these two particular staff are very skilled at accessing those and supporting residents with access to them.
Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. Did Councillor Ratcliffe move the motion?
He did indeed.
Thank you. I'm happy to second the motion. It's a great report, Rob, and to bring the service back in-house and have a cost saving as well, I think it's a fine initiative. I'd also like to support the Chair in your plea to get through the business. That's what we're here for, to get through the business. Nobody wants to stifle debate or stop questions being asked. But thank you.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to support this. I think it makes absolute sense, and I'm sorry I'm going to have to repeat the message Councillor Hobson's just done. This is one of 4 items that are left over from the last meeting, and it's not good for our reputation, it's not good for business, it's not good for our officers to sit all night and then go home and not deal with anything. So it's necessary we get business done. That's what we're here for our residents and businesses. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go to the vote then. Any more comments? Yeah, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report proposes a new employment policy on probationary periods. The idea would be to have a 6-month probationary period with 2 reviews, one at the midpoint and one at the end point. And we'd introduce it for all new starters from the 1st of February, if you agree it tonight. I did want to call this an enhanced induction policy when I was drafting it, but the senior manager said call it what it is. And I did want to call it enhanced induction because it was about making sure that staff have a really good welcome to the District Council. They have a very sound induction, supported training and development in the first 6 months, so they can contribute to service delivery as quickly as possible and get the greatest job satisfaction. Senior managers did say it's very rare to recruit somebody who doesn't meet the standards that are required, but they would welcome on those very rare occasions to have a fair and reasonable policy to make sure that if somebody isn't suitable on grounds of performance, conduct or attendance, that we do have a fair process to end their employment. So the policy has been thoroughly consulted with staff, it's been to our employee group, it's been through senior managers, joint consultative group, and JCG recommend that this committee adopt the policy. Thank you.
Questions? Comment? Question? Councillor Alison.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be as brief as I can. Can I just ask what training and support you're going to provide for recruiting managers to implement this new policy? And I note that there's a review form attached to it. Will there be an action plan attached to that for staff that aren't, are failing in their probationary period? The reason that I ask is that although you don't actually accrue employment rights for the first 2 years of your employment, there are circumstances where somebody could claim unfair dismissal. So I'm just wondering how robust this process is going to be, so that if in those rare occasions you do have to dismiss somebody, there's enough documentation there to ensure that the council isn't exposed to that risk. Thank you.
Okay. Hadn't proposed to do formal training for recruiting managers because actually they're doing this stuff already. You know, we already provide a good welcome, sound induction. It's just to formalise it and make sure that that does happen. And if anything does start to appear to be going wrong, that we actually pick it up rather than let it drift for any length of time. So the review form is there to provide evidence, and certainly the policy says that if the 3-month review managers start to feel that actually things are going wrong, that myself or my colleague in HR are present with the managers to make sure that the process is conducted fairly and the employee has right to representation at that meeting if they would like to be accompanied. Because, as you say, we've got to do this right. We've got to be fair by people and make sure that there's no risk of it going wrong.
Mr. Fletcher, I think was next, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no real questions, Chair, but just to say that this came through JCG and we went through it thoroughly. All the questions were answered. I was actually shocked that we hadn't got a policy of this nature, and it's time we should. So I'm happy to move that we do accept this, Chair.
Thank you. Can I find a seconder for that? Councillor Bull? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second it. I think it is something that needs to be put in place, and this is the right way forward. Thank you.
Any more comments? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I'll happily go to the vote. All those in favour? Again, unanimous. There we go. Excellent. Item number 9, organisational health, key performance. Oh, I beg your pardon, jump one, sorry. Item number 8, corporate plan 2024, performance 2021, and priorities 22-23. Steve.
Chairman, thank you. Members will note that this is a couple of months old. It was actually originally tabled on the 25th of November for the council meeting. The key item is setting target areas for next year's corporate plan, and that's reproduced on the bits of paper that are in front of you today. It's just the final column, which is the key bit of that. The rest of it is copied from previous years that member have already approved. The purpose of the final column is to set those areas which officers would then work up into detailed targets. These aren't smart targets, they're just areas to work on. The smart targets will come at March's council meeting. And just so members know that because the deadline for papers for that council meeting is now quite soon, officers have already been using that as a working basis for the last few months anyway.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions? Councillor Allison, Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a query around corporate plan reference CP20PR8, and that refers to building of affordable homes. So back in 2020, there was a target of 80 affordable homes to be built. That seems to have changed into this 2021 year, that we're now just got a programme of building council houses. So does that correlate to the target of 52 for the council houses that we are proposing to build? And then in this year, I don't see any target, any number around it. So that's what I'm just wondering what it is.
I'll let Rob come to that in a moment. It's on page, I think, 43 of the agenda, if that helps him. But in terms of next year's target, I should have made it clearer, Councillor Allison, sorry. At this meeting, we're not setting targets, we're just setting the areas for which the targets will then be set at your March meeting. Rob will be working on the details of his actual precise numbers between now and then.
Yeah, so I think the point you're making is whether the council housing forms part of the target or is the target. So yeah, so I think as I probably mentioned before, full council when we discussed council housing, our council housing programme is only be about 10% of the overall affordable housing programme that we have with other housing providers, mostly housing associations and community land trusts, those kind of things. So we're a very new provider in terms of affordable housing, and it would be wrong to suddenly jump up to a big number in terms of delivery. So we'll always have the main thrust of delivery provided through housing associations.
Sorry, can I just come back on that? So am I right in understanding that our target is now 52 and not 80?
So our council housing target is 52 over a programme of 5 years. And in terms of delivery overall, with housing associations, it will be 80 in the year. So our council housing programme goes much further into the future. But our programme with housing associations, we can see what's coming down the pipeline because we're enabling that all the time. And 80 is a realistic figure for this year. And already on Bakewell Road in Darley-Dale, there are 57 homes that are completed just on one site. So I'm confident we'll get there or thereabouts with the overall programme.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ratcliffe, Mike. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start just by focusing on recommendation 4 and just ask for clarity. Priority areas for this year and next are those that we've been given on this separate sheet here. Steve? Yeah, yes. Now, have these already been debated and agreed at full council?
Chairman, the priority areas, the target areas and the pledges all have been debated and agreed at full council.
So, yeah, I mean, this council has gone through just so much over the last year or more, and it's not been an easy process by any means for many reasons. So some things little distant memory, but we've agreed all this, have we?
Chairman, yes. So all the priorities and the target areas and the pledges have all been agreed.
Okay.
It's the detailed targets within them.
So we can't be adding anything to this. Is this more or less what we're saying?
Members can always change their corporate plan if they want.
This leads me into something else then I just wanted to air. First of all, on this sheet, we have, quite rightly, I think, given the length of time that this council has been deliberating it, the permanent site for the travellers. I understood from other documents that this was supposed to be translated into action, not action, but in resolution by March 2022, this year. My question, if it's appropriate, is to ask where we are with that in a sense, because I just have that feeling that it's not going to be achieved, as it were. The planning application hasn't gone through yet. The time is eating away into that. I have heard that some exploratory work was taking place on the proposed site, but where we are with that, again, I'm not sure. So, as I say, I mean, if you do feel able to tell me, I'd be grateful. If not within this meeting, perhaps you could send me a bit of an update. The other thing that seems to be missing here as a priority action, I would have thought, given all the emphasis that we've been putting on climate change, and this was well and truly aired last night at the meeting is this aspect of electric vehicle charging points and, you know, making more headway over that. That seems to have rather dried up. But my final plea stems almost from last evening. I could hear only about 25% of that meeting last night. I had difficulty to even see some of the officers at the back of that hall that we're in. It was an absolute calamitous meeting place as far as I was concerned. Why cannot we make a priority for this coming year the facilitation of members' involvement in these meetings? I mean, I do make that really, that point heartfelt, you know. Why can't we, for instance, enlarge this room? Why, if we had a movable wall, I'm going off, I know at a tangent, but it seems to me that there are things that have been cropping up since this went forward that I think deserve inclusion and some amendment in this. I'm sorry to raise this, but I've got another 2 years to run on this council, and those who know me will also appreciate that I like to take a very full, active part in the proceedings, and somehow over this last year, I've been debarred because you've been putting me into circumstances when I can't properly engage because I can't hear what's taking place. And why? You know, we have the resources to improve it. Let's do it, because in the future, I have a feeling I won't be alone in here. There'll be other people that you could put into this, if you like,
Mike,
category of disabled.
I think
Okay,
Paul would,
I'm going to shut
no,
up
you're
now,
fine.
Chair.
I think Paul would like to respond to some of your questions.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, anyway, for listening to my rant.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, Steve will pick up the points regarding the corporate plan, but just on the final comments that you made, Councillor Radcliffe, I'm sorry to hear of the difficulties you encountered at the meeting last night, and I think it's fair to say that certainly for council meetings, none of the alternative venues that we've visited over the last 12 months certainly have been ideal, quite the opposite. And clearly with the COVID restrictions that the council has had to try and abide by, we have been somewhat limited in the options available to us. Clearly the national situation is changing now following the announcements by government yesterday, and members themselves clearly have a decision to make as to how comfortable you are about returning all of our meetings back to the town hall. Clearly the reason why we're here this evening with the policy committee is because the numbers involved, we feel that we can hold these meetings safely. But obviously moving forward, there is a fundamental decision to make as to at what point the council does return all of its business to the town hall. And at that point, clearly, you know, we need to be mindful of the fact that all members need to be engaged. On the point regarding adapting our facilities, the point regarding the removal of this wall is actually currently being looked at. It is an issue that's been raised previously by members. It is being looked at the moment, but I'm sure you appreciate that these things can't be done overnight, so to speak, but there is work in train to look at the potential opportunity of that, the costs involved, and if it is feasible, then that will come back through the council in terms of the capital programme request for funding. So once again, I'm sorry that you've had difficulties last night and previously, but you know, it's something that we clearly do.
What I really appreciate, Paul, is your personal help, and I know that you've listened to me you know, outside of this chamber, and I appreciate that.
Thank you for that, Paul. Councillor Ratcliffe. Oh, Councillor Flitter, I beg your pardon, sorry.
Chairman,
Sorry,
if I
sorry.
might just finish off, if you don't mind, Councillor
Oh, yeah,
just
sorry,
for a
go on.
second on Councillor Ratcliffe's other question. And there is a little bit of good news on electric vehicle charging points. They do form part of the corporate plan programme for the coming year. And I'll let other colleagues send you an update on the permanent gypsy site as well.
Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, just to say, Chair, that for me, it's a pleasure being back in this town hall. This is the first time I've been back for some time before COVID, and I think we should try and get back as soon as we possibly can. But we do understand that things are difficult. On the corporate plan, I will just say that I hinted last night, and I do realise that we're in the latter stages now, the latter half of this 4-year corporate plan, which we all agreed to the pledges, and those remain for the 4 years. But what does disappoint me a little bit is that the final column is just a rehash of the pledges, and no real detail. And that's what I do look for, as I said last night. But it's probably not the meeting to really discuss those, but at some particular time, in a clear and coherent way, I would like to know how this council is going to continually save £250,000 out of its budget. I know things are a little bit better this year than what they have been in previous years, but I don't want that to get mixed up with a budget meeting where we don't really understand what that means to this council in trying to save. There's only so far you can go down the line before you get too lean and too mean. So, you know, there's got to be a happy medium somewhere. That side of it worries me. And at some stage, I'd like to know more about the feasibility study for the ground-mounted solar panels and where we think those are best to go in the Dales and what take-up there is. And it's the same with air quality. We've looked at air quality in the past, but we haven't had a speedy assurance of where we're going with that. So there's a lack of detail in what we want to achieve, when we want to achieve it, and the assurances we can give to our local public. Personally, it's the employment sites. We hear a lot about the development of Ashbourne Airfield, but they're not the only place which has got employment sites in the Derbyshire Dales, but we seem to get a lot more housing, so we need more work. And the employment sites that we have really need a lot of thought. And I'd like some emphasis on this. I agree with the place branding because that's good to advertise that Derbyshire Dales is open for business and inward investment is very important. But as far as a place to visit, we've got to balance that. I mean, we go on about car parking charges each year, but we do have to realise that there are people that come into Derbyshire Dales and they see the car park charges and they go to less affluent areas where they can park for nothing, and we lose trade. And until that's realised, I don't think that we're on a real winner. But those are some things that I want to come out of this corporate plan, is to look at these things, give that information out to members, and then we can work together and find out what's achievable and what isn't. Thank you, Chair.
Steve, will I respond to any of that?
Chairman, yes, thank you, Councillor Flitter, and there's some very good points there, and I know that Karen is planning a session on finance, with a briefing session with members, so hopefully some of the detail on finance can come out then, savings as well. I'm also pleased that I know Tim is working on the solar panels programme in more detail, and he's certainly on top of air quality too. And employment sites, you're quite right, it has taken us a number of years, I think 8 years to make the progress we have at Ashbourne Airfield, that site, but that has now progressed really well, and the road is now nearing completion, and that will then allow us to move on to some of the other sites, which you're quite right do remain important priorities for us. And then on place branding, just finally, next week there should be some good news for members on that. The new Invest in the Derbyshire Dales website is being launched, and we'll be able to send you links to that, which will hopefully attract investment and business to our area.
Thank you very much, Steve. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question before I do. I'd just like to respond to Councillor Ratcliffe very quickly. I wish you'd have come to me, Mike, and raised your concerns. I'm sure we can accommodate you in a better seating position. You know, please talk, and I know you won't come and sit with us, but I joke. But you know, let's move you upstream a bit and get you in a better position. It's not been good for all of us all round. You know, I've had members complain, my own members, how very cold it is in that room. We didn't like Worksworth Leisure Centre, so we've suffered with COVID, and yeah, we'd all like to get back in here. Rob will tell you, and Paul will tell you, I've bent their ears solidly over the traveller site, I assure you. On the issue of the budget, I'm pleased Steve has mentioned that with Karen, because obviously as Deputy Lead and Paul, we've had a quick au fait with Karen, and yes, we are better off than we thought, thankfully, but it's only a one-year settlement. But I'm hopeful that there are things that this council can do a bit more. So can I go to the question, please, Chair? And that is, how are we with the clean and review process? It said postponed until 21-22 due to COVID. But I mean, Councillor Hobson and I got involved with this when we became leaders and wanted this to happen. And I realised COVID's held it back. So I'd like to see it come to fruition and report to Council. I think it's a very important part of our work.
Chairman, just briefly, the Clean and Green Review is now progressing very well, and the target this year is actually for its action plan resulting from it to be implemented. So the review actions will hopefully be put in place in the coming year.
Councillor Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to join the queue of people reassuring Councillor Flitter on some of his questions that the two, we're looking at 2 sites for PV array, ground array, and at the moment the 2 prominent ones are the council-owned land on Watery Lane in Ashbourne and at Edgeview in Eam. So we will be looking more closely at those in the coming months.
Sorry, Chair, can I just quickly add to that, because I did want to mention the fact that I did ask for a green energy sort of event in Hawleys Park. I thought it would be a good go for us to do. I'm pleased to see the officers have put it on, and I'm looking forward to us, all joining in that event.
Thank you very much. If there are no more questions, I'll move to debate. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Just listening to Councillor Flitter talking about the airfield industrial estate in Ashbourne, which is taking great shape with new roads and new roundabouts on the A52. There's a lot of houses been built in Ashbourne over recent years, so it's only right that we do actually invest in the airfield industrial estate. I'm happy to support other areas of Derbyshire Dales getting help with businesses, business startups or whatever. But my request is that other areas take their fair share of the housing. It can't all fall on Ashbourne. So I think it's only fair there is an emphasis on the Ashbourne industrial estate. It's the biggest employer in Derbyshire Dales. It's got lots of potential, lots of companies there that are doing very well. But we're looking possibly to move away because they couldn't expand. There wasn't enough space. So I think we're on the right track in what we're doing. But I'm happy to support other areas. But I would make a plea that you've got to take your fair share of the housing as well.
What I was indicating, I mean, we did support the Ashbourne Airfield, and we still do. And we do recognise that, you do have to take your turn. My plea is that we do look at other sites, not just in Matlock, but in Bakewell, in Worksworth, and further afield. There are the opportunities there, and I think we should take them as and when finances are available.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Right.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, obviously, as the point has been made, this should have come back in November, and unfortunately we haven't. So I'd like to move the recommendations that are on here, and hopefully, you know, although it is a short period of time from now till March when this was supposed to be concluded, if we'd have got it in November, would have had that little bit extra. Maybe there might be an opportunity. You know, what we've done so far is good, and yes, it's got to carry on and progress, and the likes. But maybe, I don't know whether the one's set in the pipelines to having another corporate plan workshop where this could possibly be discussed before the March budget, which might be of help to everybody. But other than that, I will propose the recommendations before us.
Does that find a seconder? Thank you very much. Right, quickly moving on to item number 9, Organisational Health Key Performance Indicators, mid-year 21-22.
Chairman, thank you. Just a brief update on this one. So this was also tabled at the November Council meeting. So, you know, time has moved on and some of these figures are now slightly out of date. However, it is actually largely a good news story. Most of the progress that was shown in the report, given the year that we had up until November 2021, is extremely good, and most of the performance indicators are doing well. The ones that aren't are mentioned there, largely COVID-related issues, but you know the progress has been good, and I think the fact it's now 2 months out of date. There'll be an update coming to Council in the future with the full year's figures as soon as we can.
Councillor Hodgson.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to move the recommendation. As we're looking at Q1 and Q2 performance, and it is out of date.
Councillor Hodgson.
Perhaps it would be wise to wait for the full year findings. Thank you.
Councillor Allison, you want to second that?
I had a question, actually.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. It's around the target for sickness for the organisation, and that isn't performing as well as it should be. And I just wondered if there's been any analysis around that sickness level related to employees that weren't actually able to take any annual leave in the organisation, and if that analysis is going to be done, is there any coincidence in employees not taking leave and then actually being off sick as well?
Dr. Endusty?
Chairman, we do normally do analysis of sickness over the last year. I think most of the sickness work has been focused on COVID-related things more than the everyday figures. But I'm sure that's something that Deborah will be taking into account when she does do the analysis at the year end. So thanks for raising it. The work that she does towards the year end will analyse the whole year's figures, and if you'd like some information on breaking down the details of that, then I'm more than happy to do that. She's in the past done that through JCG, so whatever route it comes, I'm sure that will be done.
Thank you. And it's something that I'm interested in, because I do think that employees that aren't able to take their leave, it does have an impact on their health and well-being. Thank you.
Councillor Pody. Oh,
I was just coming in there, Chair, just to say that I'll second this, because can I just say how pleased I am to see this comment about housing benefit and council tax support, and the speed at which the claims are being processed. 16 days seems a long time, but in bureaucratic terms, I can assure you it's not that long. So I think we're doing quite well there to bring it down from 3 weeks to just a little over 2. And can I also just say how pleased I am with the continuing good results on the payments of the discretionary fund that Karen and Paul Radcliffe administer. So pleasing to see the number of payments that are being made on this, because these payments are absolutely critical to some people, I tell you. And it's going to be even more necessary for these claimants when we hit the peak of this fuel cost crisis. You know, a little bit later, we're going to start talking about inflation rates. And you know, to acknowledge where that is at this moment. So well done to all those people that are involved in those payments. Well done.
Thank you. Mike, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I just want to on the sickness, if I may, because I think we have to extrapolate what the reasons for the sickness are. And I have a weekly meeting with the Chief Exec, as Councillor Hobson does, and Paul has graciously updated us with the problems with COVID in the authority. And of course, like many organisations, we've been devastated this past year and a half with COVID. So I think it's important to keep an eye on that fact. I did a diploma in the police, and the average sickness at one time in the police force was 17 days per man per year. So if you times 17 days times about 1,800 officers now, that's a hell of a lot of days sickness. There's an industry standard, which ideally you should be below 5. And at one time, I know we've written that. I know Deborah's not here, but it's questions I have put to Deborah in the past, and I was satisfied at one time we were quite well below that target. So I think it's, you know, I think we just need to keep an eye on what the reasons for the sickness are. And yeah, you're right, Councillor Ellison, it's important that people get the leave, because anybody off sick impacts upon the next door colleague. Thank you.
Councillor Ellison, you'd like to come back?
Yeah, just, am I right in understanding that this sickness level excludes sickness related to COVID? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Thanks, Chair. I think, not to really to single any department out, but I think the planning department does warrant a real thanks for their efficiency, because I think we found, and this has been seen nationwide, that the number of planning applications during lockdown did increase significantly when people had more time to look at different projects that they were working on, probably more money because they didn't have transport costs, and that record is really great. Thanks.
There's no more comments.
Sorry, I did let you know a while ago, but I think
I must have a lot of
you were looking over me instead of to me. No, I just want to make a comment and ask a question of Rob, actually. But I want to start off by just saying that I think that over the past few months and years of COVID, the organisation or health of this council has been very well run by the CLT team. And I think we've got them to thank for keeping this council running as an organisation. But looking at the figures, and I know the old figures now, but I can't miss this opportunity on food collection, because that was rising at the time, and then of course we came into December and it wasn't that. But the service still isn't perfect. We're still getting an awful lot of people now that aren't bothering to use their food caddies because it's not being collected. And only last week I had to report that some bins in Matlock Green hadn't been collected for weeks before Christmas. And it's a real problem for some people. And we tell them to report, but they say we don't give a monkeys about KPIs because nothing's done. And in that particular point, in case I reported on the Friday because it hadn't been collected on the Wednesday. On the Saturday, where I was told it would be collected, every single day until Wednesday. I went down, and it was waited till the following week. It hadn't been collected. It has now, thankfully, but people are not wanting to report because nothing is happening. So I think we need to take a grasp of the food collection service. The other the question I wanted from looking at the figures in this, and I just wanted to ask Rob if there's still such a thing as homelessness and intentional homelessness, and what is the criteria for people being made intentional homeless if it's still a case in point? Because I know that there's a lot of concern with, especially with the lack of income coming in now and the effects of the COVID period and the coming price rises. I am concerned that we're going to get more people falling into that situation, and whether it's intentional or not, I don't want to see people become homeless.
That comment on it, Rob?
Yes, thank you, Chair. That's a good question. In recent years, we had the introduction of the new Homelessness Reduction Act, which changed quite dramatically how local authorities approach homelessness. So it's very much a prevention-based approach. So whether somebody's intentionally homeless or not, there are also priority need groups which have an extra protection built in. So as an authority, we aim to support anybody that approaches us and provide them with the appropriate advice. We don't really go down the intentional route anymore. People still do press the self-destruct button on a regular basis, not paying their rent and so on. And some people are very difficult to work with, given behavioural issues or addictions and so on. But the team, we've got a very empathic team, and they do a lot of work with a lot of sympathy to support people with all sorts of problems, and they will put a lot of effort and time in, from street homelessness through to people fleeing domestic violence. So we're fortunate because we've got a strong network of support agencies around us, and we don't really now put people into different boxes whether they're intentional or not. It's all about trying to help everybody.
Councillor Bird, do you want to come back again?
If I may, thank you for that, Chair. Just want to respond to Councillor Fitter. I've got 2 pockets in my ward, Steve, which are problematic like yours. And I actually went 2-3 weeks ago to Brailsford Parish Council to come out of there with my ears burning like, quite crazy. So I asked Ash to come to the Chief Exec's meeting last Monday to brief Councillor Hobson and myself. And Ash's report is that, generally speaking, we've got much improvement in the district, but he recognises there are pockets that are problems. The final report is due out soon, and we'll all be appraised of that, obviously. On the increase of percentage increase in the country, which we're all expecting, financial increase, I have put Karen and Paul on notice that I'd like us to look at that. I think we need to look at the hardship fund again, and I think we need to recognise that some of our residents are going to be struggling, particularly if we go down the route that's been predicted, 50% increase in energy costs. That's frightening, even for all of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No more comments. I'll go straight to the vote then. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 10, transformation of systems to support members, service and governance. Jason.
Thank you, Chair. Members have got in front of you a report that proposes that the Council purchases a committee management system at a cost of £20,000. The report sets out some of the limitations with the current system of publishing reports and minutes and providing information about councillors online, and sets out some of the benefits of moving to a committee management system. Paragraph 1.3 highlights some of the risks in the current arrangements and some of the inefficiencies that we have in producing the paperwork that's brought before meetings, and some of the examples given there are that we could publish information in error, exempt information or confidential information. There are some issues around version controls, and so occasionally there is a risk that the wrong version reports go into the public domain. And in terms of the inefficiencies, my favourite example is a set of minutes. So if we publish a set of minutes for a meeting, we actually publish them 4 times in 4 different places. So they're held on the network drive that the council's offices uses. They're uploaded to the members portal. They're uploaded onto the website in 2 locations, and we also have a system that's called Trove, which they're also uploaded onto that as well. That is a very inefficient a mistake. They've got to be changed in all 4 locations. A committee management system would avoid that because you would just publish the document once. In terms of the benefits, we think there are a number of benefits to moving on to a committee management system. There are benefits for members, so members will have greater access to the information that you might need to prepare for meetings. The current system means that the minutes and agendas are not easily searchable, whereas the system would be fully searchable and you could do your own research. There is an option that we intend to take up of uploading historical information. So all the information that we currently hold will be able to upload onto that system and make that fully searchable. There is also the benefit that the system will include an app that can be downloaded onto tablets. And the benefit of the app is that when agendas and minutes and other papers are published, they will be automatically uploaded onto the app and made available offline with little intervention from members. The app updates when you move into a Wi-Fi connection. Once uploaded onto the app, those documents are can be fully annotated, so members can make comments and make notes on those papers, and they are retained alongside the files. There are other benefits in terms of the system will include a library of information. The current members portal has some limitations about how information is presented and whether it's not searchable, and so the library would be a bit more intuitive about where to find information and access that. The app will also provide the opportunity to have the whole constitution on the app, so members with your tablets will be able to have a copy of your own copy of the constitution to hand. And of course, the Constitution would also update automatically whenever there are any subsequent amendments to the Constitution. In terms of members of the public, it will improve the access of members of the public to information relating to members and meetings. Again, the public website has issues about members of the public being able to search for information they want. You'll see that at the moment we upload each agenda as one single PDF file, which makes it extremely hard to find specific issues and specific items. Members of the public will be able to register as users of the site and receive automatic alerts when agendas are published. They can choose specific committees, so every time a planning committee agenda is published, if that member of the public is subscribed, they'll receive an email alert telling them that that is available. They can also subscribe to alerts on words. So, for example, if somebody wanted to subscribe every time Bakewell was mentioned in a report, then they could have a subscription and an alert when that happens. It also means that all information relating to members and meetings is in one place, and it will also be more accessible. So again, at the moment, we've a high dependency on publishing information as PDF documents. Not all our PDF documents are fully accessible, whereas, say, for example, decisions from committees, they would be published on the website as text on a web page, which means it'd be more accessible to readers and other equipment that people might need to assist to access our information. And it also improves the transparency, so it makes the council more transparent. At the moment, the register of members' interests involves receiving the forms from members, updating a database, producing a report from that database, and then uploading that report as a PDF onto the website. A committee management system will be much more dynamic, so members notify us of a change, and it's automatically updated. There is some self-service functionality, but that might be a step too far in the early days, I think. And then in terms of officers, there are some real opportunities to improve the efficiency of how we pull together agendas and meeting papers. There is workflow functionality, so that as reports go through the various approvals before they even reach members, there will be a clear audit trail of who has seen the reports, who's had the opportunity to comment on them, and it does give us that version control that I mentioned earlier on. In terms of recommendation 2, you will see that the proposal is that the purchase is funded, so it's included in the capital programme, but funded from revenue grants. The grant that we've identified is the electoral IER grant, and basically when individual electoral registration was introduced several years ago, the government offered additional funding to support that transition. They've stopped doing that now, but for 2 years we put in funding bids to try and access justification-led bids for ER funding grant, and we were successful in 2 years, and it does mean that we do have that sum in reserves from receipt of those grants. There is a connection between the elections and democratic services teams. They're located in the same office. There is a degree of crossover because they are, they work very closely together and they're small teams. And we believe that some of the efficiencies within the team from a new system will help the team address some of the demands that are coming up in terms of electoral administration's bill, which will include voter ID. The timescale for the refresh of postal votes is going to be reduced to 3 years from 5. So when the bill gets royal assent later in the year, it will help us respond to some of the additional demands arising from that. There are some savings arising from moving over to a new system, because it will allow us to stop paying out our annual support costs to Trove. The members portal is reaching the end of its useful life and will need refresh, so the new system would address that. But we do recognise that the purchase of a system would require annual revenue funding of £11,000 per year, and so it's proposed that will be incorporated into the revenue budget. And then the final recommendation is that the purchase is carried out through a G-Cloud 12 procurement framework. That's a government procurement framework, and we have procured other IT products through that framework. The committee management systems out there are only a limited number of suppliers, both of which are available on the framework. It is quite specialist because the systems are not a typical document management system, because they are tailored very much towards local government and local government legislation. So it's proposed that in order to get the benefits of the government procurement framework and also speed up the procurement process, that we go through this G-Cloud framework. In terms of timescales, if this is approved tonight and approved as part of the capital programme at Council, then our target, and we believe it is achievable, is to start or go live from the start of the next civic year, so that's after May this year. And that gives us plenty of time to do the installation and provide training to the core team will be using the system, other officers around the organisation will be using it, and of course to members on how to use it.
Thank you very much, Jason. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I read your report with interest, Jason. I, for one, have had ongoing problems with the members' portal, and I rarely use it. Just recently, I've been experiencing problems too with latest committee papers in our own website. For some reason, it keeps throwing me back, telling me it's a restricted site, as though I'm not entitled to have a look at the agendas for certain meetings. However, anything really that promotes greater efficiency and service use for members and indeed this council as a whole has to be supported, I have to say. So I'll certainly move that we accept this recommendation. But I'd like to make just one comment and sort of couch it as a question too. And I'm being slightly facetious here, so forgive me. If I buy a piece of technology and the sales advisor says to me, would you like to buy a further 5-year service or whatever, I say to him, no, thank you. I expect it to be working and continue working under the guarantee. Is it usual, having spent £20,000 on the systems, that you then have to pay 11,000, 50% of that cost annually to have it supported and ensure that it continues running? Perhaps it does.
It is quite a common practice.
Oh, well, that's fine.
I'll just
That's
clarify
okay.
that the £20,000 in year one includes the support costs for the first year. So the ongoing revenue commitment starts in year 2. But from that support cost, you get online support, so that there is support if the system goes wrong. We are proposing to move towards a hosted solution rather than host it in-house. And it also includes any updates. So as legislation changes, then the product itself is changed to reflect any changes in legislation or even best practice. So I've worked in a couple of organisations previously that have had committee management systems, both using different systems. And one of the benefits was that we for both systems, we had regular user groups. And at those user groups, ideas would come forward about product improvements. And whenever a product is improved, the new release is included as part of that annual ongoing support cost. Yeah.
Flitter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to second this, so I don't know whether you want to bring a seconder in first before I speak, or whether I carry on now.
Okay,
Yeah, I'd like to second it, and I'd like to say thank you to Jason for answering my queries beforehand, and the very full explanation I got about it. Just in terms of cost, I think it's really cheap, actually, for what you're getting. For a fully hosted solution, a cloud-based solution for 11,000 a year. The only thing is that like a site license, or is it per user? That's my only query, I think.
It is a site license.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's great, and I'm really looking forward to using it in May. I think it will bring a lot more benefits to the organisation to what we've got already. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll bring you back then.
Yeah, the reason I didn't second it was it's not because I'm not going to support it, it's because I'm not tech savvy. No, by any means, if you see my performance this afternoon trying to get information out of an energy company, that is on the phone taking me through their online system, it's absolutely ludicrous because they can't enter in emails, they can't enter in telephone calls. Everything's got to be done online and in a complicated way after you've heard about half an hour of adverts on the other end of a phone. You know, I do take on board the sentiments of this item, but I have to plea that access to information has got to be able to be navigated in an open, clear and understandable way. Because I'm not the only one on this council that isn't tech savvy. And I think that that has to be borne in mind. We get used to one service, we get to know, and I've never had a problem with the members portal. And also I like to go on Ionate, is it, that I can highlight everything and I've got it on screen. So I know, you know, roughly what I've got to say. But, you know, I recognise things change. I have fears that, costs escalate so much in technology and they don't last that long before you need a new system. So my question was about software. How long is this software hopefully going to last? How secure is it? You know, I'm surprised that Councillor Allison said it's cheap, and I take her word for that. But honestly, you know, I can see costs escalating, and we're having to make another decision in a few months or a couple of years. So, I mean, how secure and how well is this operational? Is this software?
Yes, I mean, basically, in the first instance, because we're procuring through the procurement framework, the contract is for 2 years, and then the option to extend for +1+1, subject to satisfactory performance. As mentioned before, I have used both of the main providers of systems on the market. Because it is a bespoke product for local government, they are conscious, both providers are conscious that their customers are all local government, and local government has faced challenges over recent years in terms of funding. So their increases have been reasonable in my experience. And in the example of the system that was used when I used to work at the National Park Authority, they actually froze their prices for several years to reflect the fact that their customers were struggling. But I think the contract itself links it to it's one of the pricing indexes. I can't remember off the top of my head which one, but so that the costs, the increase in costs, if they impose them in 1 year, would never be above one of those inflationary indexes.
I think Steve will have to arrange some training. I'm sure it'll be arranged. I'm sure we will. Councillor Purdy.
Thanks, Chair. I think we're going to have to be very careful in the future with all these tablets and everything else, aren't we, on, you know, where we leave them on the train or something, otherwise we'll be in the national press. Jason, you mentioned some laborious processes. Is there any cost savings benefit going to this system?
I'm hesitant to respond to that, and the reason for that is because in the 2 places previously that I've introduced a similar system, there were cost savings, and the cost savings were through staff efficiencies. So in both cases, I ended up deleting posts from the establishment in order to meet the ongoing revenue costs. The problem here is that we are so finely balanced in terms of resources in that democratic services team that option is not available. But I have a calculation which I think is fairly reasonable, is that across the organisation, bearing in mind this system could be used for not just member meetings, but meetings in community partnership meetings or other meetings as well, that there is a potential to save, and this is quite a low estimate really, about 845 hours a year, which equates roughly to the full-time equivalent of a Scale 5 Democratic Services Officer. And on the issue of security, both systems have a function that if a tablet was lost or stolen, it's probably Nikki knows the technicality more than I do, but basically there's like a dual authentication. So if a tablet is lost, it can have its authorization removed so that no documents would continue to be downloaded to it.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you. It's just to empathise with Councillor Ratcliffe, because I've had exactly the same problem, Mike, with accessing documents just recently on the portal. But the ICT service desk have been immensely helpful, as has Tommy and as has Jason. So it has been sorted out, but it is incredibly frustrating. So you're not on your own.
Well, thank you, members. It's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 11, fees and charges for 22-23.
That's fine, Chair.
Karen, I'm sorry I couldn't find you down there.
This is actually a joint report between several directors, as is shown in the report, but I've got the honour of presenting it. This is an annual process that we go through, members will recall, each year to set the fees and charges for the coming financial year starting 1st of April. The revised fees are set out in the report. I've just got one update to explain to members, and that is paragraph 1.3 refers to the Consumer Price Index, which it says stood at 3.1% in October and rose to 4.2% in November. Yesterday, the figures for December were announced, and the CPI has now risen to 5.4%. So most of the fees and charges proposed in this report are well beneath that. Furthermore, we've frozen some charges. We're proposing to freeze charges for Bakewell Store Market, local land charges, search fees and taxi licensing fees, because we don't feel that those services can bear an increase or ought to bear an increase. In some cases, we're not allowed to make a surplus. Most of the exceptions to the 3.1% or the 4.2% inflation are set out in the body of the report. There's one area that I'd like to particularly highlight. I'm sure members have already spotted it, and that relates to the collections for bulky waste. These prices have been proposed to be increased by significantly more than the current rate of inflation. The reason behind that is that a recent internal audit report recommended that these charges be brought into line with the charges that the contractor, Serco, passes on to the council. In other words, we want to pass on the full cost from Serco to the customer. Previously, we'd been subsidising these charges, so effectively all other council taxpayers were subsidising them. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allison.
Thank you, Chair. I did email actually a question about the loss that the council is currently making on the bulky waste collections. So I want to know what the difference between was what we're actually recovering from our residents to what we're actually paying, but I've not had a response or even acknowledgement of that email. The reason that I wanted to ask that is because I think it's been mentioned already about the hit to everybody's cost of living that is coming up over the next year through increasing energy prices, food prices, just that the extra expenditure households have to meet in the next year. And I would be interested to know if there's a possibility that we could offer concessions on this charge so that our most vulnerable and low income residents can get a discount on this charge. Thank you.
Can we answer that?
Thank you. Councillor Allison, if you sent the email to me with your query, then I can only apologise. I've had an immense number of emails in the last couple of weeks, so I apologise if I missed it. We haven't actually calculated the difference in the sort of lost income, if you like, in those charges. So it's something I could do later, but I'm not able to provide that to you now. In terms of concessions, there was a working group of members, I think we used to call it a scrutiny committee, that looked at this matter some years ago, and it was at that time it was agreed that it was not affordable to continue to give concessions for these items. And I think if we were to give concessions now, it would actually cost us a lot more than what we're proposing to increase it now. And we wouldn't achieve our aim to pass on the cost to the people receiving the service. It could be said that, you know, other taxpayers shouldn't be expected to fund a discretionary service. On another matter, I mean, I know because I've recently ordered a washing machine, most of the companies do offer a recycling service where they'll take back electrical goods for less than these prices. So there is a service available.
Yeah, I do understand that, but we do offer concessions on pest control. So people on council house benefit and I think there was another council tax benefit and housing benefit who are over 65 actually can have a 50% reduction in that. So why are we able to offer that reduction in that service and not on this one?
I think if I can remember back, because pest control did form part of that same review and it's going back 10 or more years, I think at the time there were no pest control companies that offered a lower charge service and offered concessions. So there was kind of no alternative for people in those groups. Whereas as it is now, there were other cheaper alternatives that residents could use for bulky waste collections, particularly electrical goods.
Thank you, Councillor.
So basically you're saying to me that this can't be offered as a accessory service to some identified residents?
It could be, as it is for pest control.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is my advice to you as your finance officer is that it's not affordable at the moment. Okay. It's up to members at the end of the day what charges you set. But there's a problem with affordability.
Yeah, which is why I asked for the figures, so I could see whether there's an affordability issue there or not. Thank you.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. A question, Karen, if I may, to concentrate on paragraph 3.2, your financial risk assessment. Can I just preface it by saying that I need to be careful what I'm saying in a way, because my political ethos is where it's possible, I try not to support increases that are going to put undue hardship, financial burdens on residents through increased costs. However, I am aware, and I think I'm right in saying this, that whenever we have considered fees and charges, generally speaking, we put the increases in line with inflation. But clearly, we're bearing additional costs ourselves. Now, at the beginning, as it were, of the report, I came across the comment that some of the increases would be in line with the inflation rate as it was at the time, as it were, 4.2, but that some would be pitched at 3.1%, and we would have an explanation later. But I couldn't see any explanations. The amount was simply stated. I wondered if there was any more detail forthcoming as to why particular fees and charges had been set at 3.1 and not the 4.2, although obviously those rates were varying month by month. October's rate, CPI rate, was different from that in November. Now, tied in with that question is the comment too that you again gave us, that it's highly unlikely that we'll see an inflation rate decrease over coming months. Indeed, I think the rate at the moment is around 5.25. Anyway, it's certainly in the 5%, I believe, and it's quite likely to go towards 7%, I believe, once the fuel increases kick in. Again, looking at your commentary in 3.2, you make the very clear statement that we've had over some time now that either corporate finances either need to make savings or we need to generate additional revenue income. We've got a £500,000 funding gap in the short to medium term. We've got to deal with that. So would it not have been more income beneficial to have used 4.2? Is it, I'm going on a bit here because you answer that you've got more financial acumen than I will ever have, and I'm sure you'll tell me why you set 3.1. But was it because you felt that the overall income would be depressed if it was set at too high a rate? Is it, I don't know what the commercial term is, but there's something about if you pitch your prices too high, overall you actually bring in less. Anyway, I'll leave it to you, Karen, to
Thank
answer.
you, Karen.
Okay. I think it'll help if I try and explain the process that we go through. So normally we start this process in early December or late November, because as you can see from the pages and pages of fees, it takes quite a long time to calculate them all. So when we started that process in November, we had the inflation rate for October, which was 3.1%. So that's where we started calculating them. As we moved through that process, the inflation rate for November was announced at 4.2%. So the corporate leadership team decided that so we could have a little bit extra, which is our usual practice, and close the budget gap, we would look at pitching some fees at 4.5%. So the fees that were calculated later have generally been set at 4.5%. But those officers who'd already proposed their fees at 3.1% were asked to have another look, and where they thought they could push them up to 4.5%, do so, but where they didn't think that customers would stand the charges, they left them at 3.1%. So the term you were trying to think of is customer resistance. So what they were trying to bear in mind was, how much effectively can we increase them without getting to that level where customers just won't use the service, and then we'll have even less. So that was why we sort of started with 3.1% and then pushed some of them up to 4.5%. So of course after that, only this week, we've had the announcement that inflation's now 5.4%. but we didn't have time to recalculate all the fees. I'm hoping that because these fees are for 22-23, I'm hoping that although inflation will go up over the next few months, I'm hoping that over the course of the year it'll drop back down again, you know, so that over a period of a year, the 4.5% will be about right. In terms of the explanations within the report, those are given in part 2 of the report. So what, I don't know if I worded it badly, but what I was trying to say was increases that are not between 3.1% and 4.5% are explained in part 2 of the report. So we've explained where we're proposing to freeze fees or where we're increasing them by more than 4.5%.
May I ask you a general question while I've got the opportunity, Karen? You say, and no doubt you have a much finer tuning to the financial environment than I do, but if it doesn't go down and does come up to 7% or indeed slightly higher, do you consider that we will have to take some interim measures to take account of these increases? You know, it's going to be affecting us, isn't it? And no uncertain terms. Never mind this £500,000 that we've got to save from grant deficiencies.
Obviously, I've been thinking about that since it was announced yesterday. In terms of these fees and charges, we wouldn't generally revisit them during a year. They're set for the year. But the problem that we could have is with regard to balancing the budget if inflation adds significantly to our expenditure. The big areas of risk that we're currently looking at in terms of what we're building into the budget that we'll be bringing for you to approve in March are pay awards, because the general inflation tends to push pay awards up, and inflation on the larger contracts, such as the Serco contract. Their next price increase isn't due till next August, and it'll be based, I think, on June or July rates of inflation. So we'll have to see, but we're currently reviewing how much we put into the draft budget for those. If we've already set the budget and inflation continues to go up and prices go up, that's why we have a general reserve and what we call the working balance. So those two combined, we've got about £2 million set aside to help with emergencies and unforeseen events like increases in inflation.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Flitter.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is a difficult one. It always is this time of year. I know some services need to be paid for. Some I would like to see a concession. And some I think that we're not allowed to make a profit on, so we don't have any choice. But I've got the same problem here. I've got Matlock Town Council, to be quite honest, because running community rooms, to run them cost effective, we would have to double the price of the hourly ratings. And that goes on to what Mike was saying, that even if we have a reasonable increase, it will still deter some people from using the service. And yet, to provide that for the community, it will cost many tens of thousands of pounds to provide that service. And we should be doing the same. You know, people pay their council tax, and it's what we use it for. But on the position which really stood out for me was the Serco situation and bulky waste collection. I do see the point that if we're being charged that amount, then we have to recover that. and there is only a certain sector of the society that are actually going to use that. It certainly would have made my decision different if I hadn't to use the service a few months ago when I got rid of a large freezer in Winster. I didn't want to put it in my vehicle and transport it elsewhere, so I engaged the services. At the cost that we're proposing, there's no way I'd even consider that. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that there are a lot of other people that will not use that service, and I'm worried about where these appliances will end up. And the only thing is that fly tipping will increase. Now that in itself, fly tipping cost this council a pretty penny. And my thoughts were that, well, couldn't we produce something in-house, a service in-house, a lot cheaper than that, and take the savings from fly tipping? I think it's something that should be considered at somewhere along the line. But I do realise the reason that you're putting that price up. My other two minor questions. One is the replacement of the criteria for replacement bins. Now, it is the council's policy and Serco's policy that these bins are left on the street, sometimes overnight, so they're out there at 7 o'clock in the morning. They get misused, they get damaged. They get damaged while the guys are emptying the bins. There's no fault to the resident, and is there a service there that we can replace them a lot cheaper than what is stipulated in the report? And the second question is, I am concerned about events, local events, having to work under the restrictions that this council puts on them in organising events on district council land. They're far too rigorous at the moment, and we're getting a downturn in events by local groups. One thing hit me, and that was, what are the normal working hours on a Sunday and bank holiday? Because we surely, within those times, empty the bins on the parks when they get full, and we clean the toilets, because that's one of our busiest times. So what are the normal, outside of the normal hours, where these charges will take place? Thank you, Chair.
Gary, will I come back on that?
In terms of the replacement of bins, I understand from my own personal situation, when one of my bins was lost, that when a resident calls to say that a bin's lost or damaged, the officers do take them through a process to try to understand the reasons for that, and that they only charge in certain situations. Now, I can't tell you what exactly those are, but there is some sort of process. And I also understand that it's not the full charge that's passed on in all cases. For example, if it's a recycling bin, they don't charge for those. We can ask someone from the waste team to provide you with more information on that if you wish. Again, I don't know too much about events. I can refer that on to Ashley Watts. The only thing I can tell you is that where events are held on district council land, there's a higher, well, there is a risk that the council can be involved in any litigation if there's a subsequent accident or personal injury, and that's the reason why we set out criteria that the people must abide by.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to remind that, welcome back after COVID into our town centres. It is important that people are allowed and able to put on community events so that we can bring vitality and enjoyment back into our town centres.
Thank you very much. There's no more questions. I'll move to debate. Councillor Purdy.
Chair, I heard what has been said tonight and I made some notes, and on the last note, Councillor Flitter, I've had problems in my ward with these events because there's problems all round. But basically what I was told was it's liability, as Karen's alluded to, and insurance. And I think it's a £10 million liability. So I think it's something we need to look at. And I've made the other 2 points we need to look at. But I'm going to move the recommendations, Chair, on the basis that I think the officers have been extremely fair in this. We could have gone to the 5-point odd, we haven't. And we had a discussion, did we not, Karen, a couple of weeks ago about this. I know then you were monitoring what the next CIP would be, CPI. So I think by and large it's a fair reflection of what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't do. We've got this funding gap. As we all know, we've had council tax freezes for a number of years, which has affected us badly. The pandemic and the other incidents have cost us more badly. So, you know, we're not a cash-strapped council like we used to be. And we wish we were. We wish we could do more, but we're not. That's the bottom line. And so we've got to be prudent. We've got to try and help our residents, and we've got to try and help our businesses. And how do we square that circle? I do think the officers, they've obviously got the reds on this, and I do defer to the more expertise of Karen, and I'm happy to take that professional advice and therefore take the recommendations forward, Chair.
Councillor seconding that?
I'm happy to second that. Thank Karen and the staff for all the hard work they've done. You can see there's an awful lot of work gone in here. I'm pleased to see that we were able to hold some charges, particularly for the store markets at Bakewell, and we do have the concessions for some of our charges. So I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour? Those against? Abstentions?
Thank you very much. This is a report again that should have come in November and was carried over to the meeting today. It's the resident survey report, which has been done a little bit differently last year upon the request of members from the GNR committee on the 19th of November 2020 and the GNR committee meeting on the July the 1st, 2021. So the things that we were being asked to do was to increase the number of responses that we had to our resident survey. Members also wanted to gather qualitative data, so some opinions on why people were scoring us in particular ways. They also wanted to see an increase in younger people aged under about 35 responding to our surveys as well. So we undertook the surveys last year, October, November time. We did 4 different methods. We had a random postal survey and we had a response of 1,066 people to that one. The consultants that we had carried out 180 face-to-face interviews across our market towns, and they particularly targeted people who were under 35, who appeared to be under 35. We've got 201 responses from our online panel, and it's the online panel that we use every year normally. And then we also this year tried something new, and we had a survey which anyone could access and reply to, and that was promoted very much via our social media outlets with colleagues from communications there. Another thing we did was we asked for more volunteers to join the online panel because it was felt we needed to refresh that membership. So as a result, we have a total of 1,815 responses from all of those different formats. In 2020, we had 421 responses from the online panel, so it shows there's been a massive increase in responses. In terms of people under 35, in 2020, the surveys came from about 2% were under 35. This year, we're up to almost 11.5%. I think it's accurately 11.4%. So you can see this method's worked quite well. We now have 72 additional people on the online panel, so that's increased that quite significantly as well. A lot of the comments or the results we found for all 4 methods were very similar in terms of the trend. But we found that the people who answered the online, the open survey, tended to be the most negative of the 4 survey groups, and we found that our online panel tended to be the most positive across all of the areas. A lot of comments have been come through, and actions are in section 19 of the report that have been suggested to go on to reflect the service plans. Excuse me. As there's lots of information in there as well. Some of it was actually really aimed at county. I think some people get a bit confused as to what are our responsibilities and which are counties. So at the moment, I'm sifting through information, passing it on to colleagues within the organisation where comments have been made about waste particularly or an area. And I'm also passing information on to partners such as county where that's appropriate. I think that's all I was going to say.
Well, thank you, Liz.
That's okay.
Any comments? Councillor Ellison?
Thank you, Chair. I thought it was excellent. I think it's a really excellent report, and the feedback and the number of people who've engaged in it is brilliant, and to get those younger people doing it is really good as well. And what I found really interesting was breaking it down by ward. So you could see how different areas of the Dales were responding to different services they got from the council. So what I'm asking now is that you said this is going to feed through into the service plans for next year. So are those service plans going to be targeted to the areas where you've got most dissatisfaction with those particular services in the service plans?
Sorry, yes, and I think that what you'll find is that a lot of those action areas reflect items that we've got in the corporate plan anyway. So things like the waste was obviously a big issue, housing was another issue, and that's obviously quite clearly in the corporate plan as well. So I expect to see them all reflected in the service plans.
Yeah, what I was particularly interested in was the responses to access to sports and recreational facilities, and Doverage's response was really, really low, and I expected that because we just can't access them really.
Yeah.
So what I wondered was if in that service plan for that particular area in the council, so will they be targeting specific improvements so that we can see that score uplifted next time?
My understanding is that it is. I can only report what I'm given by service managers, unfortunately, but certainly they are given all of this information by myself and through other channels at CLT, so they are fully aware that we do need to see some action in some areas. I don't know, Steve, you want to add to that?
Well, I can add that information's been passed on to the sports development team, and I would guess it might be the sports development team, perhaps more than building sports halls, that might be more of the activities that go on in, say, Doveridge. But, you know, rural areas are places that the sports development team do need to get out to, so knowing where there's gaps is helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Ellis, would you like to move it?
I'd like to ask a question, Liz, if I may. And I have to say, this is a very, very detailed and weighty, in a sense, and I don't just mean the length of it, but it's really probing there. But I wanted to ask you a bit about the statistics, as it were, behind it, to know that some of the results are such that we really do need to sit up and take notice here and do something about it. Because I don't like getting these comments about extremely dissatisfied. I think to myself, you know, what's going on? And we should be doing something about it. First of all, are there respondents from every ward and geographic area contained within Derbyshire Dales? And are they such that they are a representative sample of the population within those wards? For example, you might only need one in I don't know, Lytton, but I would have thought you would need maybe half a dozen in Matlock and Wirksworth. So that's one, yeah?
Okay, so on that fact, that question there, the amount of respondents that we had in total makes the overall results statistically valid. However, as you point out, we've got some wards where we may have had very few responses because they're quite small wards, or people just chose not to respond or not to take part in the services. So that's why in some ways we've been reluctant to put too much information about responses to specific questions on specific wards, because as you said, some of them we might have had only 1 or 2 responses, others we might have had 20. So I think the value in those is the comments rather than the number. It's about using the comments that were made by the people that chose to make them that are valid, rather than us saying, well, 3 people in this ward didn't like this, therefore we've got to do that, because that's not necessarily statistically valid. I think to answer your question more fully, it would be a matter of looking at a specific question and the responses to that question and where the responses came from in terms of the geographical area, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I noticed in this area of dissatisfaction that waste collection figured. You didn't give us any weighting, as it were, but I'm wondering if that hadn't coloured the whole response about dissatisfaction, because clearly it must have done, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now, you know, that is a particular circumstance that the council have encountered these last 18 months or so. One hopes it's going to improve significantly. So it's some of the other things that I'm interested in that are promoting dissatisfaction. Now, you very clearly have been very objective about this. We've got to be a little bit more subjective, I suppose, and say, well, you know, what's the reasons for this, and what are we going to do about it? And that's what I want to start thinking about now. But to base it on what you're giving us, and it's that detail that I think we need. We don't just want the figure. I want to know what underlies it, so that I can do something about it. You know, whether it's investment or, you know, getting a few fingers pulled out.
Yes, and we do have a lot more detail. Obviously, I've got a record of all the comments that were made, and I've got the spreadsheets from the consultants as well. So we've got all the numerical data, and we have got all the comments as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure if members wanted to have more detail on this,
but it is a really interesting report, as I say, to look at the detail. But you really got to give it time and look at it properly, and you know.
Yes.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you very much, Mark, for your contribution. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Well, it's certainly something we should take action on, no doubt about that. I'm very pleased that you've responded to members' requests, because it is a much more detailed survey. So thanks very much, Elizabeth, and the other officers that have helped you with this. When it first came out, I did ask the question at one meeting what the officers felt about this. And some of the officers were quite honest and said they were quite upset, because obviously its reflection on the dissatisfaction survey impacts upon their own department. Thankfully, as we would expect, waste is the biggest issue. You know, we knew that would come about. I do think people have forgotten the fact that the pandemic has decimated all authorities in the country. And as we know here, those of us that have been here a long time, we used to be 400 odd staff. What are we now, 180? Something like, we just can't do the same, and yet people expect more. You know, we've only been talking before the meeting tonight. People's expectations are so high. Interestingly, I see that some of the dissatisfaction at 7.10 are highways, so I'll shove that over to our learned colleague over here, get him to sort it out. I can't know anything about potholes and parking and traffic and roadworks and verges. High council tax, we wish. Lack of deteriorating services, that's austerity cuts for you, isn't it? you know, let's face it, 10 years of austerity cuts, what can we do? I think we need to take this as a snapshot, learn from it, act upon it, not just put it away, but act upon it. Pick out the salient points, and that's where more of the detail will come, Elizabeth. But just be reflective that, you know, we've had a hell of a bad 2 years, bad year, and I'm sure that hopefully things will improve this year and we'll get better satisfaction surveys in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. If no other contributions, I'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So this report's just to update members on the progress we've made in implementing the action plan arising from our external review. If you can remember, the public sector internal audit standards require that there's an external review of internal audit every 5 years. We had our external review in May 21, and this committee got a full copy of that report. So the review did conclude we were compliant with the standards and noted a lot of good practice. But also the review made a number of recommendations where we could further improve. So Appendix 1 of this report, that details the recommendations that were made and the action that I'm taking to implement those recommendations. And you'll note that some of the recommendations have been implemented already and some are in progress. For a number of the recommendations, it did just make sense to introduce them from the start of a new financial year. So we'll be introducing those from April 22. So the main thread of the recommendations was to further embed our work in terms of risk management into audit processes, and also to align our risk appetite with that of the councils and what the council has in its risk management strategy. So again, from the new financial year, there'll be a clearer link between our assurance levels and the priority of our recommendations to the definitions within the risk management strategy. I intend to bring a further update of this action plan attached to my annual report, which comes in sort of May-June time. So it's really just for information, and the recommendation is that the report be noted.
Jenny, Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. On page 191, you talk about a matrix that was used, training for staff. What you also mentioned about the level of impact on assurance levels. Can you just explain a little more about that, please?
Impact and likelihood. So we'll tie in our recommendations so that it's transparent where our recommendations sit in that grid in terms of their priority and the risk associated with those. Because I guess at the moment sorry, I haven't got my mic on. At the moment, audit's naturally probably more risk averse than in what's in the strategy. So what you might find is the more lower priority recommendations, which we would currently have as medium. So if we make a medium recommendation, it'll to tie in with your strategy, it would have more significance than perhaps a medium recommendation now. We'll start that from April to have this year sort of with a recommendation graded consistently. We'll start that from any reports from the 22-23 internal audit plan.
Thank you very much. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Murphy, thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous. Done.
Thank you. So again, this summarises the reports we've completed since this committee last met, and also provides an update on the implementation of audit recommendations. So we've issued 3 reports, one with substantial assurance, which is our top category, one with reasonable, and one with limited. You can see the details of those reports at Appendix 1. The limited report was in respect of waste management, but that's going to be going to a future meeting of the Community and Environment Committee along with the independent review, which is why you've not got a copy of it here. We haven't detected any fraud, you'll be pleased to know. The second part of the report is in terms of recommendations made. Considering the circumstances of the last year, I think good progress has been made. There are some that are red, overdue, but officers are working on those and making progress. So again, the recommendation is the report be noted.
Councillor Allison.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a quick question about the procurement item. It said that the SLA that had been sent to Derbyshire County Council was sent back unsigned. Can I ask why that was?
I'm not aware of what that was. It's a question for your officers, that really. Our recommendations are for officers to implement.
Can I ask Lee to intervene?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, Councillor Addison, we have some sort of difficulty sometimes in getting hold of legal officers from county. I know they're stretched as well. So this was an error. We've been chasing them to try and get it signed, and we continue to do so. But it's our best efforts, and we're on trying to get this sorted. It will be signed. I'm absolutely certain of that. But it's just trying to get hold of the right people, especially in the current situation.
Thank you. If there's no other comments, I'll move to debate.
I'd just like to ask. I'd just like to ask a quick one on Treasury management under reconciliations of investment loans and borrowing. That was in red in September. I wonder whether there's any progress on that item.
Jenny would like to answer that.
We haven't done the Treasury management audit this yet, so we were waiting for an update from the Financial Services Manager on that. I think we'll have to come back to you unless Karen knows whether that's now been undertaken. Yeah, I'll need to come back to you, Councillor Flitter, but what I can tell you is that we've recently appointed a new principal accountant, and she has been improving the Treasury management records and procedures. So if it's not already done, I'm sure she's working towards it, but I'll email you to let you know.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. If you'd allow me your discussion, I'd like to ask Paul a question. You've been sat there very patiently overseeing us. I thought I'd bring you in at this late stage in the evening, if you don't mind. And I hope you don't feel I'm putting you on the spot, as it were, by this question. But I see that in this report, we've had reference to the independent review on the waste collection service. I know a little of it already because one of my colleagues sits on the working group, of course. The reference on page 198, paragraph 2.5, says, and you've answered this before, you've said this before, that it will go initially to the Community and Environment Committee. As I understand it, this report, although due on the 16th of December last year, will not now be in our hands much before the end of this month, or indeed early February. Now, correct me if I'm wrong there, but will it then, after proceeding through the committee, go to full council? Is there likely to be a special council convened, or do you already have one of the established council timetable dates set aside for the consideration of this report? And finally, will it also be made public, the findings of this report?
Happy to answer those questions, Chair. When the independent review was originally agreed unanimously by all members at Council, the resolution at that point was that it would be referred to the meeting of the Community Environment Committee. So that is the intended course of action as at present. That meeting of the Community and Environment Committee will be a special meeting. The independent review officer has concluded the review. The final meeting with the two members of the working group has taken place earlier this evening because due to circumstances, two members weren't able to be present at previous meetings. And we do expect to receive the report fairly imminently. As soon as we receive that report, we will then look to schedule that special meeting with the Community and Environment Committee. But as members are probably aware, the meeting's diary is pretty busy over the forthcoming weeks. So the first opportunity that we get, then that meeting will be called. If, after having considered the report at the Community and Environment Committee, members wish to refer that elsewhere, i.e. to Council, then that clearly is a decision that members can make. But at the moment, based upon the earlier resolution of Council, it's not the intention to have a special meeting on this issue at a later date unless members request it at the point of the Community and Environment Committee. So that's what members resolved back in November, I think it was, and that's what we'll follow through. So it really will be for Community and Environment Committee to determine what happens after it's considered the report.
Thank you for that, Paul. Right, I'm looking for proposal and seconded for to move the motion. Chapman, count. Much. All those in favour? Unanimous. There you go. Right.
Chair, can I just check, did we get a seconder on that?
Yes, I did.
Yep, so thank you.